Hi, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic presentation. I'm very excited and very happy because right now we have with us Doug O'Brien, who is a master trainer of NLP and also a master coach. He's the author of The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth. He's a certified trainer of hypnosis, trainer of Heavening techniques, and a master trainer of NLP. And he is based in New York. As a hypnotherapist, he helped found the Department of Complementary Medicine at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in the 90s under Dr. Oz, where he provided pre-surgical hypnosis to cardiac patients. As a seminar leader, he traveled the world teaching Neo-Ericksonian Hypnosis, sleight of mouth, the Heavening techniques, coaching, of course, and storytelling. And he's the author of the forthcoming book, The Storyteller's Handbook. So I'm very, very excited because you know, Doug O'Brien has been with us in the past for past summits. I'm stumbling here, I'm mumbling, but that's okay. He will talk me out of this very soon when he's gonna start presenting. That's why he's also back now for another amazing event here with talking about coaching, because he's one of the rare teachers who is able to integrate NLP, Ericksonian hypnosis, coaching, so that his students develop both conscious and unconscious competence. And I'm very excited because this is going to be a very conscious, unconscious competence that you're going to have at the end of this presentation today, as Doug O'Brien is going to introduce and teach us about the 5 essential coaching skills that will make or break your practice. Everyone, let's welcome Doug O'Brien. Thank you for saying yes again, Doug, to our invitation.
It's my pleasure. Great to be here, Eugene. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It's fun to watch go through that.
For everybody who's watching this right now and wondering why are these dudes laughing at the camera instead of talking about coaching, we just had a cracking joke going right before we started here, and I was mumbling and I was all over the place, but then we got straight, we got concentrated, we got focused. So Doug, what are the 5 essential coaching skills that will make or break someone's practice?
Well, in all honesty, there's probably more than 5. People need to have quite a few skills if you're going to be a good coach. But what I have seen over the years is that there are 5 that I've selected to talk about today that are really essential, that I have seen in my own coaching practice. I dare say learning from one's experience. I was about to say mistakes, but both are true. Learning from one's experience, one's mistakes, and just coaching others on how to be coaches over the years, that these are 5 really, truly stumbling blocks that can make or break your coaching practice. So with no further ado, I won't list them all. I'll go one at a time. And the first one may be possibly number 1 for a reason. It may be the most important one. I'm not sure. It's hard to say, but it is certainly critical. And that is to be able to listen. To be able to actually listen. People are not good at this skill for some reason. People very often, probably not the listeners, not you, listener. I'm not talking about you, but a lot of other people I've read about that are not good listeners, who tend to be thinking in their brain about what they're going to say next, rather than listening to what's coming in.
But if I gotta stop you right there, just to be a perfect example of exactly. So playing devil's advocate, everyone here, just hear me out. So if I do not think of what I'm going to say next, I will be caught with my pants down when you stop talking. So I don't know what to say to you next. So how do I counteract that?
Get comfortable with silence, Eugene. I know it's not good for a podcast or for a summit to have the radio silence kind of thing, but it's really effective in coaching to let yourself just pause and be silent for a moment, let things settle. I think that, I do a lot of Ericksonian hypnosis. It's been my life, really. NLP is what I'm known for, perhaps in a large way, sleight of mouth, etc. But really heavily influenced by Erickson's work and other people who were also like that. Stephen Heller was one of my teachers. Dave Dobson was one of my teachers, very Ericksonian in nature, although not necessarily directly of his lineage. But same type of thing, wherein being present is really critical, and listening and
Mhm.
noticing, deeply noticing, not just listening, but noticing the other than conscious communication as well. Taking in what the person's communicating on all channels before you get into your response. To let it land, to let it take it in, to get it all in. And to me, that's almost like a trance state. You kind of go into what Stephen Gilligan, one of my other teachers, refers to as the coach state, where
Mhm.
you are just kind of in a field of receptivity with your client, and you're just sort of accepting it, which is also really useful for the client to be in that state, because a lot of times what they're coming with is a problem. There's an obstacle, there's something they can't handle. That's why they need your help. That's why they're in your office for coaching, or virtual office online. But that's why they've come to you for help, because there's something they can't handle. If they could, they wouldn't need you. Right? So there's something that they're
Mhm.
coming in that's a problem. And sometimes that problem is got its solution in its hands, ready to give it to you if you would only be open for it. So we need to say, instead of like, not that, I don't want that, it's more like,
Mhm.
welcome, welcome. What
Yeah.
what can we learn here? What's the gift here? And that requires this sense of deep listening.
And I think what you said when you started, that was perfect, and I loved it. I was actually, when you said, get comfortable with silence. Um, and I think many people actually are not comfortable with silence. Sometimes I'm not comfortable with silence, and it's like I get antsy. I should do something. I should say something. Otherwise, what's going to happen here, right? So that's perfect. Thank you.
Now, it's an interesting phenomenon, because Milton Erickson often would say, trust your unconscious mind. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of good reasons to do that. Your conscious and unconscious mind are both you. They both want what's best for you. They all, you couldn't exist without either one of them, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're both on the team. They're both in support of you. So you should trust that it's doing what's best for you. And when you're a coach, you need to be able to trust your unconscious mind. All the learning that you've done is going to be there for you. So you can just sort of sit back, turn off your conscious inner dialogue so much, and just listen and take in, and then trust that what's going to come up will be appropriate. But what's a
Mm-hmm.
conundrum about that, of course, is that if you haven't been studying coaching or NLP or hypnosis, these different coaching modalities for a long time, if you're brand new to it, then maybe you're not quite so sure about what your unconscious mind, and maybe rightfully so. Maybe you don't have the skills yet, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because it's like, there's a piano over in the background. I don't know if everybody's seeing the visuals here,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a piano player, and it's kind of like that. When you're playing, like, for instance, a jazz piece, as an example. Most of what jazz is improvisation. You're making stuff up as you go, but there's also a structure to it. Right? There's also
Mm-hmm.
a basic song that your improvisation is based on. You're playing, Blackbird by the Beatles or something, and then so you're playing that song and improvising over it, through it. And then if you're playing with other musicians, you're listening for what they're doing and responding back to it and supporting it in different ways. But so it's all kind of trusting your unconscious, but there's also, you
Mm-hmm.
need to have practiced enough to know what key this song is, what the chords are for the song, what the melody is for the song. So there's a structure that you have practiced, that you get
Mm-hmm.
skills in, and then you can trust your unconscious from there.
So really, it is quite difficult, you would say, to trust your unconscious, as long as that, this. So as long as you're unconscious, of your unconscious, it is difficult to trust it.
That's good. Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose so. You should always trust it. You should always trust it. The thing is that, of course, when I talk about playing jazz, it doesn't have to be like, John Coltrane level jazz. It could be
Yeah.
high level jazz, which isn't so great, but it's jazz still, but it still has that structure to it. And it's still my unconscious mind. When I improvise, it's still me making it up. So it may not be something that anybody would want to rush out and buy the record to hear it again, but it's still the same process, right? So at any level, you can take what skill sets you have developed and trust your unconscious mind will be able to dive into them. And every human being, if they've lived somewhat aware life, has a lot of resources that they can bring up and resonate with in a coaching situation. I don't think too many people are being coaches without at least some training in coaching. You can trust that those skills will be there for you.
All right, awesome. So that would be number one, or not necessarily the number one, but it's like first on your list would be to active listen. And how is different active listening from regular listening? Apart from I'm waiting for you to finish to speak so I can talk.
Right. Well, part of it is that, of course, and just really taking in, really understanding it. Because in most conversations, people don't. You're just thinking, oh, that reminds me of my sister, and your mind kind of wanders off. So you want to be present to the human being that's talking to you, and not, multitasking, not, going on your phone. I don't know what you're doing right now. Are you multitasking?
I'm right here.
Okay.
This is what I'm doing. Whereas, this is what I'm doing.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'm writing down times as you are going through the information, because I want to put down key ideas from your talk. And I hope everyone who's watching is doing the same thing.
So the idea is that, active listening is also listening for key words, and if the person is speaking auditorily or visually or kinesthetically, or if they say, if they're representing things in all the visual, auditory, kinesthetic modalities, you want to be listening for that. You want to be listening for beliefs that are popping out and stumbling blocks that are coming out, and things that they may not be, automatically consciously aware of. Curious thing about speaking, and this is really true, and there's been a whole therapy field developed from this principle that I'm about to tell you, is that the part of your brain that creates language is a different part of your brain that listens to language. So if you repeat back to a person exactly what they have just said, you say that again, if you repeat back to the person exactly what they have just said, very often they will be hearing it for the first time, because they haven't heard it. When they said it, they weren't listening, they were speaking. They were creating the language. I had a very interesting client once. I had a gentleman who was a Russian diplomat or whatever. He came to my office in Manhattan with a simultaneous translator, this woman that came in who was amazing. She was like a filter. She would hear his voice one ear and she'd just speak it in English out the other, and vice versa. She'd bring in the Russian, out would come English. She'd then listen to what I was saying, and out would come Russian. It was just astonishing. It was fluid. It was no delay at all. It was just amazing. And then somewhere around our third session, the gentleman got up and he had to go use the restroom. And so she said, "Would it be all right if I asked you a question for me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, go right ahead." And so now she is trying to formulate her own thoughts into English.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a stumbling kind of presentation. She had to really work at finding the words. It was amazing to see, because it was everything else I'd ever heard her say was just instant flow, no problem.
Yeah.
And this was like really struggling to formulate the words. So that part of the brain that formulates the words is a different part of the brain than listens. Have you had that experience? You speak multiple languages.
Yeah. And, it happened to me, of course, both personally, but also as working with clients, because what I've noticed as well was client says something, I repeat it back to them, and then they say, "That's not what I said."
Right.
It's like, what are you talking about? That's exactly what you said. No, I never said that. Or if I said it, I didn't mean it. Yeah, but you said it. Even if you didn't mean it, you still said it, right?
But what happens then, of course, is then they will think about it and rephrase it to try to get at what they meant to be matching with what they are saying. So it's a really valuable therapeutic tool. And like I said, there is a whole field of therapy, Rogerian therapy, Carl Rogers' work back in the 50s and 60s, completely based on this. If you watch Carl Rogers at work, he is basically saying back to the person exactly what they've just said, but asking it as a question. So he'll say, so what you're saying is that da 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 da, and I'll just say the same words, but as a question with an upwards tonality, and they'll go like, well, yeah, I guess, well, what I really mean is, and so then they'll go deeper into their own deep structure, because they haven't heard it before. Yeah.
Amazing. And actually, I've seen this kind of, sort of happening this way with, like, for instance, somebody says, I have this problem. And then you go and, talk to the person and ask them to say whatever they just said. And like you said yourself, to say it as a question, I have this problem. And it comes out completely different. Like it has nothing to do with whatever was said before.
Right. So the second key that I think is really important is to then, from that listening, to be able to ask really targeted questions to get them to that same level of investigation, even though they're just repeating back to exactly what they said might not do it, but asking questions that do help them dive deeper into their deeper meaning. So in the world of neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, we have this thing called the meta model. Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with the meta model. Meta model is a very basic NLP principle. It's literally the first thing they developed in the field of NLP. John Grinder taught a class in it like in 1974 or something like that at the University of Santa Cruz, when Bandler and Grinder were first formulating NLP. They came up with this thing. He taught it to his linguistic students. He was a professor there. And so that was like literally the first thing. The Structure of Magic is the first NLP book. So meta model is asking pointed questions or specific questions to find out deleted or generalized or distorted information that the person hasn't specifically stated in their language. It's based on the idea that if I, for instance, went to the store, if I left here and traveled to the local grocery store and came back and did something, and I tried to explain that to you, to describe it in detail, I could perhaps write a 600-page novel or a book that would describe every step I took along the way, and maybe it'd be pretty good. Maybe you'd have a pretty good visualization of what it was like, etc. But it would never really be sufficient, no matter what I did, for you to actually have the experience. But there's a difference between the representation and the experience. Words can never fully represent or represent the experience. So there's always, in every language, going to be distortions, deletions, and generalizations. So by asking these questions, like, well, what do you mean about that specifically? Or who was that specifically? How specifically did he go to the store? Did he run? Did he walk? Did he ride? Did he drive? Did he drive fast? Did he take what route? How specifically did you do that? So you're asking for specifics about exactly what the person means. Interestingly, in the early days of NLP, Robert Dilts was talking about how when he took that course, he was in the course from John Grinder, that original course on the meta model. He had himself, Robert Dilts, had developed over just his childhood a way of kind of being a chameleon. He'd be different with different people. He matched and mirrored in a sort of natural way. And so when he learned the meta model, it was because Bandler and Grinder had modeled Virginia Satir in her way of doing therapy. They had modeled Fritz Perls in his way of doing therapy. So when they brought this meta model to the students, and Robert took these learnings from this 3-hour class home with him and started, applying it to his mother and his uncle or his sister or the friends down the street or whatever. They would have some really amazing therapeutic breakthroughs because he'd be asking these questions in very similar way, perhaps, to what Satir did and Fritz Perls did, and with a great deal of rapport. So they knew he really cared about them. But nobody else in class apparently had that skill. So everybody else in this class went without any rapport, with all these meta model questions, and saying, well, how specifically did you go to the store? Did he ride to the store? Did he run to the store? You know, we were like cross-examining everybody with no rapport.
Yeah.
Creating all these meta monsters throughout town. It was a bad situation, but pretty funny to think about in retrospect. But the idea.
So what are the? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue. I'm sorry.
I was just saying. No, it's all right. I understand you were thinking about something. You wanted to say it.
Oh, that was so good. That was so good. So please continue. Please continue.
All I was going to say, Eugene, is that so we want to have rapport while we're doing this targeting questioning, that we want to listen carefully and then ask deepening questions to find out, you know, specifically how do you mean that exactly?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So are you saying that the key to asking targeted questions, or to ask questions that reveal the deeper meaning, so to speak, those questions actually, they are revolving, so to speak, around the question of how? Would that be fair to say?
No. Close though. But basically, there's like 50 different meta model questions you can ask for unspecified verbs, unspecified nouns, modal operators of necessity, possibility, you know, universals. You can always ask questions to unpack those things. That's just 5 out of 50. But there is a question that my friend John Lavelle once said is the kind of universal meta model question that you can ask pretty much in any of those categories, and get some more specific information. And this is what he said the universal meta model question is. So it's, what do you mean?
And it comes, does it come with the sound too?
Oh, yes. No, yes. In fact, sometimes that's emphasized even more. So it's be more like, what do you mean? Right. So yeah, you really emphasize that part. So good. And it's nasal,
Awesome.
nasal part. It's got a really important.
Awesome. So what do you mean is like the best way to ask a question that you want more details, more information on, basically? Is that correct to say?
Yes. Yes. I think so. Okay. Say it again.
What?
Just say that again. There's a little bit of a lag on our thing here. So could you just repeat?
I said, what do you mean is the best way to ask questions that reveal more information from the person?
I would say yes. And if you really do understand the meta model, if you get hold of all those things, all those 52 different varieties of meta model questions, that is the best way to really understand it in detail. But if you don't know, then the what do you mean is the next best option, because it'll give you some information. Just as an example, when I first learned the meta model from Tony Robbins, because Tony Robbins was my first NLP teacher back in the 80s. He actually taught NLP courses back then. So he was my first NLP. He taught that the question that you ask for, what he is called the comparative deletion. So I say it's really good, or it's the best, or it's too expensive, or it's, you know, that comparative deletion. He would say, well, compared to what? So his response would be, it's compared to what? So as an example, if I said it's too expensive, your coaching services are too expensive. And the question would say, well, too expensive, that's a comparative deletion. Compared to what? Which is be his immediate response. That's a good question, but it's not the best question to ask, because what information will you get from that? You're going to get what it's compared to. So your coaching services are expensive compared to Joe down the street, whose coaching services are cheaper. So, okay. So now you know that you can get coaching from Joe cheaper. Yeah, it didn't help my cause very much, did it? But if you ask a better question, like, in what way is it too expensive? In what way? Then you're going to get different answers. Well, because it's I can't afford it, or because whatever, you're going to get different information, different quality information from the person that you're asking the question to.
Yeah.
That will probably be more useful for you in helping guide them into a direction that you want to go.
Got it.
So yes, go ahead.
I love it. I love it. All right. So that was already, we got through 2 of the top skills.
Yeah. We might have to have more time here, Eugene. No, but
Yeah, no
seriously.
worries.
So the third one is similar to both what you're doing in number 1 and number 2. And the third one is belief elicitation, to really find out the full belief that they have. Now, I don't know if you've read my book or Robert Dilts's book on sleight of mouth, but in the sleight of mouth, we have what's known as the normalized belief structure, that all beliefs have a structure to them that is the same. It's always the same structure to a belief, which is represented by a triangle to a square to a circle. Some of your readers know what I'm talking about, listeners know. So the triangle represents a cause. So it's sort of flow chart symbols. The triangle is a cause, which leads to an effect, which is the square, which leads to a meaning. So cause, effect, meaning. Every belief has all 3 pieces to it. Sometimes in NLP, we talk about the cause-effect belief. We talked about the complex equivalence belief, as if they're 2 separate things. But they are actually one thing. A cause-effect leads to the complex equivalence, which is the meaning. So if you can discern from that person what their full belief is, you'll be much better off than if you just sort of take it at a surface level. So if you like, I could give you an example of that.
Yes, please.
So keeping it very simple. So the cause effect is X causes Y. So if this, then that is another way of expressing it. If this, then that. So if it's raining out, then I take my umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's raining, then I'll take my umbrella is a cause effect. Now, what's interesting is that can have a different meaning for different people. So it's the same cause effect, but it's a different meaning. So the complex equivalence that could go onto the end of the circle that would attach onto this triangle to the square might be different for different people. So if it's raining out, then I take my umbrella means I'm a wimp for some people. Or if it's raining, then I take my umbrella means I'm prepared for another person. If it's raining, then I take my umbrella, which means I'm going to be gone all day for somebody else. So there could be different meanings ascribed to this cause effect action. So if you just get the cause effect, you may not know the full belief of what they're talking about. So if I'm late, then Eugene will be mad at me. Right?
Okay.
Because that's the way you roll it. I know that. I know you very well.
Oh, wow. Is that the way I roll? Okay.
Well, not based on today's class, no. But seriously, if I believe that, though, right, if I have that belief, if I say, if I'm late, then Eugene will be mad, that might be based on some personal history that has absolutely nothing to do with you directly, but I might believe it because it's always been the case. People have always been mad at me if I'm late. I'm late all the time. People are always mad at me. Those are universals, by the way. Always, always.
Yeah.
Always. So, but that's a belief, the start of a belief. And it might have a different complex equivalence on it for different people. So I would want to find out, so what does that mean to you?
All right. So when somebody is stating their beliefs, then you kind of like drill down even more and ask for even more details of what that means to them. And do you actually specify what does that mean to you, or is that just enough to say, what does that mean?
Either way works just fine. So it's kind of like the meta model, in that the meta model, you ask questions to get, deleted or distorted or generalized information. With this part of it, you're still asking questions, as you just demonstrated. Like, what does that mean to you? That's a question.
Yeah.
But there may be different questions than there are in the meta model. So there are questions like, well, so if somebody just said it's bad,
Yeah.
Right? You'd say with the metamol, you'd say, well, what's bad? And you'd say, well, the weather's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, well, if it's raining, then I'll take my umbrella. Right? So you start drilling down and start getting those beliefs. So suddenly you hear an if then.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you hear the word because, your little antenna should go up because you're about to hear a belief.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you hear the word because the word because has the word cause in it.
Mm-hmm.
And an if then belief is a cause effect belief. So
Mm-hmm.
because signals that you're getting that if part of the sentence. If
Mm-hmm.
this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And just by the way, it's totally logical. It's totally logical. When you stop and think about it, we do live in a cause effect world, don't we?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
cause effect. If I drop, let me see. If I drop this bottle, if I let go of this
Be
bottle,
careful what you drop in.
how about this pen? If I let go of this pen, it will fall. Oh, there
Yeah.
it goes. Right? If this, then that. It's a cause effect world. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But beliefs are not necessarily true. I mean, this is true. If I drop that pen, it will fall. That is a cause effect. We believe things to be cause effect when they're not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, if I'm late, then Eugene will be mad. Maybe not,
Mm-hmm.
probably not. Eugene's a very nice man, right? So probably won't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Totally.
flexible. Yeah. Kidding. God.
Yeah. All right. So
Everyone.
belief elicitation, finding what people and this actually I think goes very well hand in hand with the targeted questions, because when people are thinking something, if they say themselves, they are not actually aware, so to speak. They're not conscious of what actually comes out of their mouth. But if you repeat it back to them and point out that that is a belief that they hold without being conscious of doing so, sometimes that is enough for somebody to have an epiphany, to have a realization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, when I learned coaching, just by the way, I learned NLP from Tony Robbins back in the day, and then I went on to take other trainings from other people. So I've learned NLP from Tad James, Whitewood Small, both of them at the same time, Richard Bandler, Robert Dilts, any number of people that taught NLP. I took their trainings. And same was true later on when I started studying hypnosis. I would study from anybody who was teaching it and learning as much as I could from lots of different people. Reason I tell you this is a reason that just flew out of my brain.
That's perfect. This is just go with the flow, have a moment of silence. And if nothing happens, then that was meant to be so.
Thank you.
So we're talking about belief elicitation and going hand in hand with the targeted questions, where people become aware of whatever beliefs they have only because you feed it back to them. And
Correct.
anyway, even if that thought doesn't come to your mind yet, it will at some point during or after this recording.
Yeah.
But we can still go to the next point of the 5.
Okay, so the next it'll come soon, right? Come on. Yeah, so the next thing one needs to do is to help to create a change strategy. Yeah, I know what I was going to say. I learned coaching directly from Thomas Leonard. Thomas Leonard, if your listeners are not aware of Thomas Leonard in the world of coaching, they should be. He started it all. Were it not for Thomas Leonard, there would be no field of coaching. He literally started the field of coaching. Thomas Leonard was early 90s. I heard a presentation by him at a conference that I was also speaking at. And he was talking about coaching. Nobody did coaching. Coaching was baseball coaching or football coaching. That's all coaching.
Yeah.
So he was talking about life coaching at this seminar. They're like, what the hell is that? But I listened to him. He's a fascinating speaker. And then I spoke to him a little bit afterwards in the green room. So I have met him, but almost all of our interactions after that were on the telephone. Because prior to the internet, early 90s, teleseminars, were telephone, where it was literally
Yeah.
landline phones. And I recorded several of the classes on my answering machine little thing. So I have these little micro cassettes of our conversations.
Wow.
But to Thomas Leonard, coaching was a conversation. Coaching was a discussion, a conversation. That's what it was all the time. So let's talk about that. It was a strategic sort of conversation. When I started going further into it and starting applying what I also know from the world of NLP and hypnosis into my coaching, then it has expanded. I do other things as well beyond just the conversation. But step number 5 is to negotiate a change strategy, because we want to have a conscious buy-in to what we're going to be doing. So we want to sort of say, this is the plan going forward to do this step and then this step and then this step and this step. So we have a change strategy that could be an NLP process, right? You could do some sort of NLP process, change personal history process. You could do teach them a swish pattern. You could do something even deeper, like whatever that thing's called. I can't remember right now. I think I've caught your brain disease. The fog.
So when you say negotiating a change strategy, basically you kind of like, until now, a step 1 through 3, you kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but steps 1 to 3 are steps which you as a coach, you are kind of eliciting from the unconscious mind of the client. You're eliciting their beliefs, you're eliciting their, state, you're eliciting their situation. And then from 3 to 4, then you kind of switch, and now you're not on the receiving so much anymore, but now you're in the proposal, where you say, hey, let's see what we can do with the information you gave us, you gave me through this coaching session. Now let's go to the next step, where we start negotiating. So we take a more active approach here on step 4.
That's correct.
Kind of like absolutely. Pacing and now leading.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. So the thing I was looking for was core transformation, was the word I was looking for before. Core transformations is a deeper NLP process, but it still is an NLP process. It is taught separately, but it is still part of the NLP world. But it is the kind of thing that you could do in a coaching session with someone. It'd probably take up the whole session. It's a long process, but it still would be the kind of thing one could do. And yes, you stated it exactly correctly. Between 3 and 4, you kind of shift into doing something from the elicitation that you did in the steps 1, 2, and 3. And sometimes there is a very seamless kind of transition. You wouldn't know step 3 or just step 4, because the beliefs sort of come out, and then you start dancing with the beliefs, like, well, isn't this important than that? And sleight of mouth type of responses, etc.
And even with core transformation, right? When you can actually very beautifully dance with core transformation, so to speak, in a coaching session or any other method, where you basically, the client says, now you know what their beliefs are, how their inner experience is happening, and now you go to the next step, where you basically, you call it negotiating a change strategy, where basically what in different words, I would say, start applying different techniques to help the client achieve the change they want, basically, right? And like I was saying, that with core transformation, you can very easily swing into that, because like, hey, where are you? What's going on with the whole process there?
That's absolutely true. And beyond that, I want to make sure that the client is also involved in this, in the stuff. One of the differences, I think, between coaching and therapy, and there are multiple differences, but one of the, for me, chief differences is that we're kind of co-creating with coaching, rather than somebody comes to me for therapy. It's like they come to like the doctor's office to get fixed, to get the medicine, and they're the patient and I'm the doctor kind of relationship in a therapeutic sort of situation. I don't want that with coaching. I want the person to come in and say, we together are working on this. You and me as a team are working on this, so that the negotiating a change strategy, we figure out what we're going to do, but they're the ones that do it. they're going to be at least involved. I might do a transformation process with them or whatever. I might do a hypnosis process with them, but I also make sure that they're going to be doing something later today and tomorrow and the next day, that they are, doing, acting, taking part in this change. And they've therapeutic homework assignments, if you will, things that they're going to be doing.
So between step 4 and 5, because step 4, you're negotiating a change, and then step 5, you're locking in the change with the technique. Can you explain a bit more the difference between the two steps, so to speak? But actually, you know what? They're not steps. I just realized now that I'm thinking of them as steps, but they're just different core skills. So you can use both or just one, either or. So that's why I was like, in my head, I was like step 1, step 2, step 3, but it's not step 1 or 3. It's just like different ways of approaching it. All right, got it.
Exactly.
Just by speaking out loud, I realized.
Well, see, that should be steps. Yeah, we should put that in there. Always speak out loud. Very important. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. These are not steps. These are keys. And of course, like with any set of keys, you could just use key 5. Maybe that's the right key for this door. So these are keys, but not necessarily a stepwise thing. So yeah, with step 5 or key 5, number 5, locking in the change with selected change processes from the world of NLP hypnosis or havening techniques, as I do. And the reason for this is that we want to get the understanding of the way they're presenting the world through the elicitation process, keys 1 through 3. We want to, transition to saying, okay, so this is where we've been. Where do you want to go? How are we going to get there? What's the plan? What's the route? What's this, change strategy we're both going to work towards making happen? This is where we've been. This is where we're going. And sometimes I think it's really useful to get then from the conscious process into the unconscious. So to sort of lock it in with the visualization, with hypnosis, in NLP, we call it a future pacing. We see what we're going to be doing in the future. We kind of lock it in through mental rehearsals and take ourselves in the future. Hypnosis, we can close our eyes and go into a hypnotic trance and, really experience it going forward in time, saying, yes, I'm doing this now. I really feel it. I'm actually in the future. I'm locking this in. I'm making this happen. And with the havening techniques, again, it does that same thing with adding touch, which simply adds different neurochemicals into the mix, which help us to really lock it in. I won't go into all the details of havening, but it's that sort of thing. You can use tapping, other sensory, psychosensory experiences to help that go in as well.
Yeah, and actually, I was watching a presentation on YouTube the other day, and there was a person who was commenting, and we had several videos that were playing out on YouTube for different events. And there was this one person who was always asking, well, how is this done kinesthetically? Because almost all of the methods and techniques from NLP or hypnosis, they revolve around visualization, using the visual stimuli, the visual sense, like the swish technique or core transformation or this or the other. They are, like more focused on the visual. And so this guy was constantly asking, so how is this done for kinesthetic or people who are, aphantasia or whatever, stuff like that? Yeah. And then I realized, like, havening or EFT or tapping, whatever you want to call it, that is actually a kinesthetic way of doing things. And
sort of. Yeah. I mean, it's not kinesthetic
more so than others. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. So what's happening with havening and the other things as well is that when you do this havening touch, you create delta waves. The body is electrical chemicals, so you're getting the delta waves from this touch. Delta waves in turn, because it's electrical signal going to the brain, creating chemical releases. You're getting dopamine, you're getting serotonin, you're getting oxytocin. You're getting these very different releases into the brain, which help to lock in the trainings, the learnings, because the hippocampus, in order to create a change from a short-term memory to long-term memory, requires serotonin release in delta. So it's in during deep sleep. It's during different times of the day when you go into delta. You get the delta waves from the havening. So while there's touch, obviously, this is not necessarily, frankly, a kinesthetic process, per
Mm-hmm.
se. The way I think in NLP hypnosis we use kinesthetics more likely is that we do spatial anchoring. So for instance,
Mm-hmm.
it's a circle of excellence. You go from
Yeah.
here to here. And this spot has meaning to it. This spot is neutral. This spot is like, yes, right? Or you can
Yes.
do change personal history where you're literally saying, okay, this is the past. Now I'm moving towards the present, moving towards the future, moving to my distant future, so you can literally walk across your timeline. And that the
Mm-hmm.
kinesthetics, because interesting in neurolinguistics, it's not just the gray matter between your ears. It's not just the neurology is your full body. When a
Mm-hmm.
person stands like this, there's a famous TED talk about this. When you stand in this yay pose, every human being on the planet, when they're crossing that finish line, when they're exalting, they go, yeah, this is
Yeah.
human. When you just do this, your body gets a rush of like, yes, celebration. Right? It's a power move. It's in our bodies, but our bodies and our mind are one thing. There's really
Yeah.
no distinction between the body brain. It's a body brain. you know so
Yeah.
so the kinesthetic learning of saying, okay, this is where I'm sad and depressed, this is where I'm exultant, you can train your body to be in that state more often. And if you
Yeah.
feel really down, you can say, oh shoot, I'm really down, let me change that
Yeah.
now.
And this reminds me of a presentation. I forget who was teaching it, but it was, recorded many years ago. And there was this method where the person was asking, so what is your, show me you when you're in a depressed state, right? So the person would go like that,
Mm-hmm.
they were standing. And so they go like that. And then he said, show me you when you're in a resourceful state, in a happy state, in a victorious state. And then he goes like, yay, I'm like that, right? And then the next thing he did, he said, so show me you as you go from this to this and go through the motions. And it was so interesting to watch, because basically the person would go like from here. And then, so he said, like, do it. I don't know. I'm maybe I'm confabulating here. Maybe I'm just adding my own spiel here. But if I remember correctly, he's like, how many steps do you need to go from this state to this state?
Mm-hmm.
And then just go and mark each state, right? So if you need 5 steps, you start from here, and then you have a certain state, emotion, attitude, psychological welfare and whatnot, right? And then you go to this one, which is a bit better, and then this one, which is a bit better, and then this one, and then finally you're here, right? And he was going through this, and it was very interesting to watch, and it sounds very similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. That I think that for long-lasting change to happen, I think it needs to be integrated into our beings. So it's one thing to think about it consciously.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old saying. I think it's been attributed to Confucius, and I promise you I will misquote it, but it's something to the effect of, "I hear and I forget, I see and I understand, I do it, and then I own it."
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. It's something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But I think that's really true. If I was to want to teach you how to play the piano, and I said, okay, so here's what you're going to do, and I explain it to you, so well, I guess I understood what you said. Well, let me show you. Then I go over and I show you how to do it on the piano. Be like, okay, I think I get it. But then when you do it, then you go like, oh, I got it. You're right. Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's different. So I think we need to ingrain things, and we need to integrate things. So hypnosis, havening, NLP, those processes, I think help it get into your, deep unconscious.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going to, really make lasting change.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Now, Doug, we are approaching the end of our presentation today. And before we conclude, I would like to ask, where can people get in touch with you? How can they reach out to you to learn more from your classes, your trainings, your programs, your everything? Maybe they want to hire you as a coach.
Well, there's a lot of ways. You could probably just Google Doug O'Brien hypnosis or whatever, and you'd probably find me. My major website these days is essentialcoachingskills.com.
Mm-hmm.
Essential Coaching Skills, named after essential coaching skills, learning skills that I think are essential to, yeah. And there's also, by the way, I have a podcast, Essential Coaching Skills podcast, that people might be interested in. I have a variety of
Wonderful.
different podcasts there. And they're not all NLPers. Large numbers of them are NLPers or NLP influenced, certainly.
Mhm.
Not all. But I'd look to get really interesting people on there for NLP skills that are, or skills that are really essential for coaching.
So essentialcoachingskills.com, is that correct?
That's the main one, yeah.
All right, awesome. But of course, people can find you on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and in New
Yeah,
York.
I'm also New York. Also, Ericksonian.com is one of my other websites. Ericksonian.
Ericksonian.com. All right. Now, as we are concluding this, for everybody who's watching here on this event, what would you say? What would be your parting words, so to speak, to people who are starting in the coaching world? I could call it coaching business, coaching world, coaching whatever, but people who are just starting, getting started with coaching, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I think, enjoy it. Enjoy the process. It is a learning process. You're not going to be the expert at the beginning, but it's like anything else. If you want to learn to, drive a car, you take lessons, you start off driving, you drive cautiously in the neighborhood, but you drive. And you get better at it by doing it. Same with riding a bicycle. You maybe have some training wheels at first if you're of that age, but you do it, and maybe you fall down a couple times, but you get back up. You learn from those experiences, and you just go and do it. Along the way, you'll just develop skills that you begin more and more to do what Erickson said, which is to trust your unconscious. But ultimately, the most important thing, really going back to number one, that active listening to being in that field, that coaching state with your client, that you're entering into that state together, is really critically important.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Again, thank you so much, Doug. And I'm looking forward to see you in the future for our future events and programs. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here.
All right, everyone, we'll take a quick break now. We'll see you after the break for the next presentation. We'll see you tomorrow, the page which comes first. Make sure to share with us your key ideas, points, takeaways, and everything else you'd like to share with us that is related to this event. Go ahead, stretch, hydrate, and we'll see you soon.